It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the owner of the Beyond the Boards podcast, a hockey podcast. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, Brandon. How about you, buddy?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to start a hockey podcast?
So yeah, this question was kind of an interesting one when I was reading over the list you sent me. I've always been big into watching hockey, and therefore, one day I was driving to work and I just kind of was bored listening to the normal radio. So for some reason, I got on Apple Podcasts and downloaded Spit and Chicklets, and I listened to Spit and Chicklets, and ever since that day, I've been hooked on listening to podcasts. And once I got listening and actually got into it, I was like, man, this is kind of cool. I think I could do something like this. So I started up a Blackhawks one covering the Blackhawks because that's my favorite NHL team. I started one up about the Blackhawks and it didn't really take off. It didn't really go too well. So I kind of got out of it for a little bit. And then some of the people I follow on Twitter, I was going through looking at some like other Blackhawks ones. And one of them actually reached out to me about jumping on, and I did one time, and from then on, it kind of turned into I would consider myself the co-host of that one now. And then I got thinking about it too, and I was like, well, just covering the Blackhawks kind of gets. I mean, news kind of dries up every once in a while, only covering one team. So I was thinking, I was like, man, maybe I could do one with like the whole entire NHL. So I kind of reached out to a few of my buddies and asked if they were interested, and yeah, Dan said he would be willing to do one with me. So he's like, yeah, I'll be kind of the host. You can do the social media, that type of stuff. So I was like, all right, I'm down. So yeah, Dan, my co-host, he actually lives in Florida and I'm up here in New York. So it's kind of hard to like line up our schedules sometimes, especially around work scheduling and stuff. But yeah, it worked out pretty good. We only started, I think, like a month. It was like the end of February or so when we started, and we've already grown quite a bit. We're almost at like 900 followers on Instagram, uh, 300 on Twitter and TikTok, and we just hit 400 on Facebook, 400 likes on Facebook yesterday. So yeah, it's gone pretty well so far, and we've already got a couple emails for inquiring about sponsorships, and I guess we're ranked 149th for hockey podcasts on Apple Podcasts right now. So that was kind of a cool email to get the other day as well.
That's pretty impressive. How did you come up with the name of your podcast, Beyond the Board?
It was kind of funny. I was sitting there kind of just brainstorming stuff one day, and I was like looking around. I was honestly, I was on Google looking up like name generators and stuff, and then I don't know, it just kind of came to me, and I was like, man, that's kind of a cool name, and I'm good at like Photoshop and stuff. So I was like, oh yeah, I could put like a hockey board in the background, and it's kind of fitting because Beyond the Boards, because I knew I wanted to do like player interviews and that type of stuff to get to know them kind of like beyond the boards, like when they're outside of the hockey rink as well. So I don't know, I just kind of came to me one day and it just clicked, and I was like, oh, that's kind of a really cool name, and yeah, it just kind of came to me, and I thought it sounded really nice. So,
What are some topics that you talk about on your podcast, the Hockey Podcast?
um, I kind of we just cover pretty much everything that happens in the NHL. Like recently, we did a trade deadline preview, trade deadline recap. A couple episodes we did like division breakdowns, how we think each team's playing, and we kind of talk about big moves around the league, big news, like big trades that happen around the league, big free agent signings. Um, as I said before, we've kind of been riding the college hockey wave right now with the NCAA season wrapping up. The national championship just happened, Frozen Four. So we've kind of been covering that a little bit more recently. I've always been a big fan of college hockey because I interned at St. Lawrence University, which is D1 in hockey for college. And then Clarkson is a big D1 school in hockey, and they're like literally 10 miles down the road from St. Lawrence. So I'm like up in that area where a lot of like NHL prospects have came. I went to college in Canton, New York, which is the birthplace of Jordan Greenway. He plays for the Minnesota Wild. And yeah, so I've always been big into college hockey from my time in college up there. And I've been going to St. Lawrence games since I was a kid. So yeah, I've always been big into college hockey. So that's why I've kind of been covering that a little bit more recently for us. But yeah, like I said before we started recording, I hope to expand our avenues into overseas hockey a little bit more, and as well as the women's hockey side. Try to expand our knowledge into that a little bit more. Hopefully, get some interviews lined up with some of those guys that maybe you guys or maybe you have had on.
That would be a wonderful. What do you plan on? What are some of your future plans, and what do you plan on accomplishing?
I really hope that our podcast keeps growing as much as it has. Just to see this much growth in just a couple months of doing it has just been mind blowing to me. I hope and pray that we just keep growing steadily. I mean, we don't need to have significant growth overnight. I mean, it would be nice, certainly, but just to keep growing at a steady pace and hopefully get to be one of the top hockey podcasts out there on the market.
What is something that you learn now that you didn't know before starting a hockey podcast?
I would say the biggest thing that I've learned is it takes a lot of work to grow your podcast. Like I'm sitting here at home, like every time I get a day off of work now, because I work two jobs in real life, I guess you could say, is every day that I'm off, I'm making social media graphics, I'm reaching out to people for interviews, I'm writing emails to people, I'm editing editing episodes, I'm posting episodes. I'm trying to do everything social media related to try to grow our podcast and put it into the best possible position for people to listen to our show. So yeah, I think the biggest thing I've learned is it takes a lot more work than people expect.
Who are some of your future guests that you plan on having on your podcast beyond the board?
So this weekend we are going to have Carson Jasewicz. He just finished his senior season at the University of Massachusetts, and they just won the national title for the NCAA. He was he played 4 years at St. Lawrence, so obviously I was familiar with him from his St. Lawrence days. And last year during his senior season with St. Lawrence, he got injured. I think it was like game 2 or something. He tore his ACL or did something to his knee. I can't remember exactly what it was. I got to do some research before we get on, obviously. But so he redshirted last year and just kind of finished out the season because he was obviously couldn't play. So he redshirted and then transferred to UMass for his senior season to join former St. Lawrence alum Greg Carville, who's the head coach there now. And he fit right into the lineup. He was able to play this season. He ended up leading the team in goals scored during the regular season and just had an incredible bounce back year. I can't wait to hear about that comeback story. And it was kind of crazy when they were in the NCAA tournament this spring during the national semifinal. He actually one of his close contacts, I guess, tested positive for COVID, so he had to miss the national semifinal against the University of Minnesota Duluth. Him and like three other key guys from the UMass team, and so it was kind of crazy. And then UMass ended up winning that game 3-2 in overtime. And then they went to the national championship, and he got cleared to play in the national championship. And yeah, they came out in the national championship game and cleaned St. Cloud 5-0, and they ended up winning the national title. So yeah, it'll be a really fun interview. And the guy's kind of local too. He's from Buffalo, New York. He's a huge Buffalo Bills fan too. So I can't wait to talk about NFL with him a little bit as well. My co-host Dan, he's big into NFL as well, so I'm sure we'll discuss some football a little bit at some point during the interview. So yeah, it'll be a fun interview, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
As the Frozen Four just wrapped up, can you talk about, of course, the input on the Frozen Four, and did you go to the Frozen Four to cover it?
No, I haven't really had the opportunity at that level to go and cover like anything of magnitude, I guess you could say. I was an intern at St. Lawrence University for a little bit. It was like last springish, but that kind of got cut short due to COVID during my senior season, my senior year at college. So it kind of derailed everything, and then I ended up graduating this spring. And I just haven't really had the opportunity to go and intern at like a level like that or anything that big. So I've been looking for more opportunities on the internet, and I'm thinking that's kind of why I started the podcast too, is because it kind of gives me an opportunity to voice myself and put myself out there where I didn't really get the opportunity to because of COVID.
Do you foresee yourself in the future interviewing NWHL players like Taylor Ackerson, Taylor Wisconsin?
Yeah, dude, I would love to do that in the future. The NWHL is a growing league. I think I was just reading the stats this morning from their Twitch live streams that they did this season, and I saw that they had good numbers in terms of viewers when they were on NBCSN as well. So I think the league is just growing and growing in popularity, and it'll be cool to hear about the women's side of the game as well. And I think that'll be more appealing to our viewership too, and it'll open up new opportunities for us to gain viewership that we normally probably would not if we just covered the men's side.
What advice would you give upcoming future hockey podcasts looking to get started?
Kind of like I said earlier, it's going to take a lot of work for you to grow your podcast, especially just being the new kid on the block. And there's so many podcasts out there. There's new podcasts starting up every single day. So you got to do something to set your podcast aside from everybody else. So, that and to just be active on social media. We all know how social media is nowadays, how it's just blowing up with popularity and stuff. So I think that's like the biggest way to grow your podcast. So that's the avenue I've been tackling the most, is trying to keep up to date on social media on every like big event that's happening in the hockey world. So yeah, just to stick with it and keep grinding, because you'll start to see results eventually.
That's wonderful. Where can my listeners find you at on social media, and where can my listeners find your podcast at on podcast platforms?
So we actually just expanded our podcast platforms the other day. We switched podcast hosting sites. So we are now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Breaker, and I believe that's it for podcasting platforms. You can find us on social media. On Instagram is where predominantly we're the most active. We're at the Beyond the Boards podcast. You can find us on Twitter at beyond_boards. You could give us a like on Facebook, facebook.com/Beyond the Boards podcast. And you guys can find us on TikTok at the Beyond the Boards podcast. So we're pretty flexible when it comes to the social media game. And yeah.
Thank you again, Dylan, for your interview, and best of luck with your podcast, Beyond the Boards.
Thank you, Brandon, for having me on. It was a great opportunity to be on your show, and thank you a lot, man.
You're welcome. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Dylan, for your interview, and best of luck.
You as well, man.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.